I see we look around and we're going to set. Yes. Oh, yes. You saw it. Okay. I'm okay. You're going on the news, you're fine. What area did you, where overall? Well,
Hello, all, and welcome to First Unitarian Church of Toledo. I'm TK Barger. I'm the senior minister here, and I want to extend a special welcome for this Unitarian Action event. This is the first of 4 events we'll be having this year to address the important issues that are facing all of us. And besides those issues, I also want to invite you to come here on a Sunday morning sometime. We meet at 11 o'clock here, and also on YouTube, there's a Toledo Unitarians channel. If you appreciate what you take in tonight, you might also appreciate some of what we present on Sundays. So I wanted to extend that invitation. The following is the Unitarian Universalists' creed for our congregation, and we recite it together each Sunday. This covenant will explain to you why we are sponsoring this event. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And now I'll introduce the member of our congregation, Judy Pascalis, who will be the coordinator for tonight. Judy.
Thank you. Well, since you're here, I know I don't need to tell you that we have a problem of violence in our community, particularly with young people. Just 1 or 2 of the horrible statistics from the Toledo Police. Since January of this year, 38 people have been shot. Not killed, but 8 have been shot. That's bad enough, isn't it? About 2/3 of those 38 were 12 to 24 years old. Think about that. Half were 12 to 17 years old. One recent episode that I saw reported on the news was that there were 50 shots fired in 2 or 3 hours in one afternoon. And 7 of those hit a school bus. No one was hurt, thankfully, but just think about that horrible situation. And whether, in my opinion, whether it's the people doing the violence or those on the receiving end of the violence, they and their families are all victims. We are all victims of these tragedies, and we all have a responsibility to try to do something to make this a better place. That's probably why we're all here. And no matter where you live, in the city or surrounding suburbs, the problem affects us all. It affects how people see this community. People avoid certain neighborhoods because they perceive it to be high crime areas. People avoid certain shopping areas. Can kids go out to play at night or anytime? I was telling a lady at the Y the other day, I actually exercised, and I was telling her about this program, and she said, you know, and she lives in the Trilby area, and she said that, you know, I used to be able to go out at night at 10 o'clock and walk the dog. She said, I wouldn't go out at night at all, ever. So that's what we're living with. It affects us all in all our lives. You know, we've had this drawing here in our home, Manos and I, for almost 2 decades. It's by Simone Spruce, who is here tonight. Its meaning has changed for me. Yes, isn't it great? You're going to hear from her in a minute. Its meaning has changed for me as my understanding of America and racial justice has evolved. I really don't fully remember what I thought about it when we first got it. I just don't remember. But today, I see a young boy looking toward his future. And I'm hoping that he has America and us as American citizens at his back in his quest for a positive future. Simone, you wanted to say a couple of things, right? Come up here.
I just want to thank Manos and Judy for being great supporters of my work. So my name is Simone Renee Spruce, and I am the daughter of Helen Estelle Spruce, who is a matriarch, educator, community activist, and church clerk. My mentors were artists Will Clay and Ernie Jones. If I'm able to elicit an emotional response from you when you look at my work, it's because they taught me well. I am a social commentary artist. When an issue arises that we have to create an image about, we have to sit with it a while and figure out how we're going to present the image to our audience. As an artist, I have the freedom through immediate response to tell the truth about humankind and create work that documents our differences, similarities, and moments of crisis. My work gives voice to marginalized groups and inspires the viewer to take action and seek justice. I'm informed by information which I then transform and bring forward in search of solutions, moving my audience from awareness to engagement. What I create reflects my outlook on the world, my philosophy, and my faith. I use my art as a platform to advocate and support multicultural issues that affect us on a local, regional, and global level. The drawing entitled Let Freedom Ring asks 2 critical questions. What does it mean to be Black in America? What does freedom mean to a Black person in America? I created the image in 1994, and it's still significant today. You can compare it to Marvin Gaye's song, What's Going On? We're still asking the same questions centered around tolerance and trust. I want to thank all the photographers around this country who made it possible for me to be a national artist. It is through their lens my work has been elevated. With that said, Audrey Johnson, please stand. this piece of work was photographed by Audrey, but also it was in exhibit at Audrey's former gallery, Tillman Gallery, which is, part of our hearts for many, many years. And I wanted just Audrey to make a statement about a show that she has at Fifth Third Bank right now.
I work a lot with young people, and most of them. Give us a microphone, please, so we can all hear you.
You have been reprimanded.
Hello. And I was saying that I work with young people a lot, and that's been my career for the last over 27 years. And most people don't know that I'm a photographer, that's what I went to college for. And this year I decided what I would do for myself and for others was to actually have an exhibition of my artwork, of my photography. And it stems across community, my travels to Africa, to Europe, and it just speaks to stories of people and lives and just those things that bring, my attention. And I published a book of those pieces so that people will have an opportunity to know my thoughts and my experiences through my photography. And working with artists across the city, Simone is one that I work with for quite some years, and photographing them, their work, and just being able to be in that creative mode has been an awesome experience. And I appreciate Simone and Manos and Judy. We have all known one another for a very long time, and my gallery was in one of their buildings. So it has been a great experience, and thank you for giving me this time.
Fifth Third Bank, Fifth Third Building downtown. So we have a full agenda tonight, as you see on the agenda. Many people are here who work tirelessly to try to make Toledo a better home. Many times people have different ideas about how that should happen, and we might hear some of that tonight. But I want all of us to just go away with a sense of hopefulness, not hopelessness, hopefulness, and a willingness to work together, no matter how small or large a contribution we might make. And if you have questions or comments, you can come up to this mic and ask them or tell us what you think. First, we're going to have the movie Sons of Toledo. And if you haven't seen it, I've seen it. This will probably be my third time. It's just a wonderful movie. It was made here in Toledo by Toledoans. Matt Foss is one of the writers. He's going to talk about it a little bit after the movie. It's only 20 minutes long. It's not a treat because the subject is so sad, but it is a piece of art. And that's it. But I want you to get settled, and so you can see this. What? And move around a little bit so you can see this TV, because it's really important to hear the first part. And I'm going to tell you what the first part is because it's dark and I want you to hear it. It's a man is in his bedroom asleep, and he gets a phone call, and he's told that his little brother has been shot and killed and will be at Dade's funeral home later in the day. Okay.
Your brother, my baby. hospital now. You go, Lord. I didn't know what to do, so I just started saying, they'll take 3 days and a few hours. At some point today, thank you.
start with this. When they see you here, they take out the street. You know what I'm saying? They see. I make time for what I treasure. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I choose my priorities. Yeah. Oh, let me hear you. Jesus, you're my number one. So I will make room for you. I will prepare for two, so you don't feel that you can't live here. Please live with me. Yeah. Hey, man, what y'all want to do? Me sit Yeah, good singing, man. We had some people come in the shop, man, looking like Jesus, bro, barefoot. No shirt, no shoes, no service. Hey, last year was hard. You don't remember what we had? What was it? A batter, a bird? So I'm gonna do the combo. I'll take a combo too, but I really need a Diet Coke. Oh, you know what? I'll take a Coke, please. Ah, perfect. And mouse off. There we go. Yep. My mile. Yes. Okay. Hi. May I have the light bean burrito, please? Thank you. Have a nice day.
House of Day Funeral Home, Allison speaking.
Hi, Miss Day.
Mark, I'm so sorry to hear about Terrence. He's ready if you'd like to come by now.
The barbershop kind of packed right now, so I was thinking maybe about 7:30.
That'll work. I'll see you tonight, Mark.
Thank you.
And it's not just the parents. We have to think about, we lost a generation. We lost a generation with the crack epidemic. And because we lost that generation, we got kids who didn't have parents raising their kids.
So on top of the parenting, look at the death rates. Look at all of this. We had the most murders in 2020 during the pandemic when nobody was in school. Right now, the kids are starting to get back into school, but we're on track to that 60 number, which is a record here in Toledo. We're already at 36 today.
A lot of times they say we don't have the funding. We got funding for everything else. Everything else they won't. We got, they find funding.
Mark, you all right? I'm ready for you, Mark. Stop. Stop. Stop, man. Real. Enough becomes enough.
Kids, man. Kids.
Kids not here anymore.
You know, but the thing is, it's not just kids. You know, it's adults. You know, we have to look at what we're doing or not doing, what we should be saying and not saying.
I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing is that individuals that perpetrate acts of violence are younger. When I was growing up, it was more 17, 18, and older. Now it's 15, 14, 13, and younger. It's just a disconnect. But we want to find solutions to a problem that is systemic. Like, this didn't happen overnight. Our community's been marginalized for so long, and those that are marginalized are at the highest risk. So when you don't have a voice and you don't feel like you have an outlet, or you don't feel like you have a choice, and you can't identify resources, you left to your devices.
It's difficult because, as an older guy, I grew up with a lot of love. I grew up with a lot of love in the neighborhood. I grew up with a lot of love in the community. Exactly, in the city. That's just what it was. My mom and dad are still married. They're both 87 years old. So I grew up with a ton of love. And it's just unfortunate that you could see a kid nowadays and he's quick to say, or he's fending for himself or herself, buying toothpaste at the age of 9 or stealing it. And I never had to live like that.
And it's so multifaceted. It's not just gangs. It's not just drug related. You got suicide. You got accidental shootings. You have domestic violence shootings. And so the answers and the solutions have to be just as comprehensive as the problem.
We gotta bring the mud back to the mud, Joe. Put the glass and the mud together, what we got? I don't know what we got, but we can do better, y'all. I know it. Toledo, at one point in time, we was the best city to live in. We can bring it back to this city. I know we can.
I will make room for you. I will prepare for two, so you don't feel that you can't live here. Please live with me.
Good, brother. Sure you want me to ride with you, bro? All right, appreciate you.
Don't feel that you can't live here. Please live in me. I will make room for you. I will prepare for two, so you don't feel that you can't live here. Please live in me. So you don't feel that you can't live here. Please live in me.
And somebody's phone's ringing. So, have you recovered? Unbelievably moving and emotionally shattering to me, and I'm sure to you too. We're going to take some time to talk with Matt Foss, who is the writer of this movie. He's from the University of Toledo. And Jamal was going to be here, but what's happened to him?
He's at the shop.
He's at the shop, busy cutting hair. But talk to us about the movie.
Well, first, on behalf of the team, the Sons of Toledo team, which is made up of community stakeholders, every person you saw on film is either a barber, a business owner, or a stakeholder in the success and future of Toledo thriving, some of them in this room today. It's less than ideal that I'm here rather than getting to introduce you to Jamal. Jamal was the handsome, tall fellow with the beard wearing the Jamaica tank top. But my hope is that I can authentically and honestly reflect the ethics, the how and why we told this story and why we believe that it can at least engage in a meaningful and empathetic way with an issue as complex as gun violence. My name is Matt, and I teach at the University of Toledo in the theater department. My background before I started teaching theater was actually in animal ecology. Before going to Chicago to work on learning how to tell stories, I was chasing elk in Yellowstone in Montana. So I'm not necessarily an obvious choice. And as you can see, despite teaching theater, still immensely uncomfortable in front of microphones. To talk about storytelling, or particularly something as real as gun violence, to have someone who has a doctorate in make-believe and pretend and dress up. But with that, for the past 3 or 4 years, I've had the privilege of working chiefly as a listener. For some reason, my work and how we try to go about it, particularly since arriving in Toledo, a community that feels like it's saved my life in so many meaningful ways, my work has been listening. And this holds up even when you read like Shakespeare. Hamlet is talking about that the players come into Elsinore, hold a mirror up to nature, that the brief chroniclers, an abstract of the time, particularly in a complex situation. They're a pretend one of this melancholy Dane, and here in a very real one, we have the opportunity to bear witness. Story preserves complexity. It outflanks our biases, our presumptions, and our hubris. It's a reason why prophets and teachers beneath bow trees and carpenters transition from thou shalt not to once upon a time. Thou shalt not engage us right here and may engage our behavior. But once upon a time has a type of democratic empowering where people are enfranchised and motivated to connect the dots in a way that will truly create change. So this film came about from a place of listening and definitely not from a place of expertise. These men, like Jamal, who is literally out there doing the work in the shop, providing a necessary service, but also a refuge, a community center, in many ways, a church where there is fellowship and storytelling and healing and reconciliation and accountability happening. These men give free cuts at the beginning of each semester, do school supply drives. They're literally on the front lines of trying to keep their communities together. And when COVID hit, the impact of these men coincided with the shadow pandemic of gun violence in our community, pushed many of them to their breaking point. Particularly where they are caregivers for their community, there was very little care that they were receiving. Many of these men are trained through some very innovative projects through ProMedica and the goodness of Robin Sharney of how to do everything from colon cancer screening to high blood pressure, diabetes, and now mental health CPR. And we've been doing these live events of where we get to showcase their stories, sometimes through the Toledo Museum of Art. But COVID shut that down. And in the spring of 2021, it started feeling like maybe we had a shot to try something. And they shared the story of time and time again being called to go to our city's funeral homes to give young customers from their shops their final cuts. And like any process that we start, we ask the question of how do we tell this story well? How do we tell this story now? Again, my expertise is not necessarily in many areas beyond listening and then imagining, almost like a creative engineering of how do we do this. And the men said, we should make a movie. We did not know how to make a movie, but we figured it out quite quickly, raising the money and creating a process, believing that ethics will impact aesthetics. What you saw is a blend of narrative that was written in a way that there was no way that anyone would be interpreting or interceding on the lived expertise and experience of the people you saw in the film. And then blend that traditional narrative filmmaking with documentary style filmmaking. So those sections in the shop, we had multiple cameras. We would ask catalyst questions so that every step of this short film would have this type of check and balance to make sure that it was consistently authentic with the expertise of these people who are living this every day. This was shot in the hottest week of the summer of 2021 in 7 days, led by a BIPOC team of filmmaking experts from outside our city to come in and help us build capacity to learn how to do this and build these skills, while making sure that the majority of the budget went to the participants in the project, Black-owned businesses, everything who were vendors from food to everything that we needed on that set. And then we rushed it to a screen. It premiered three weeks later in early September at the Momentum Festival. Over the past 18 odd months, we estimate that 84,000 people have seen the film to date, both in our community through free screenings like this. We raised money to do free subsidized screenings because we wanted to be always in a position to give rather than take, where the barbers would be subsidized for coming in and sharing their story, while also running an aggressive regional, national, and international effort to get the film screened and share this very Toledo story across the world at reputable and leading film festivals. It was a semifinalist for the HBO Short Film Award and a finalist for 5 Oscar qualifying festivals, winning the top prize at such festivals as the Hip Hop Film Festival, the Tokyo International Film Festival, the Sioux City International Film Festival, and a number of runner-ups and finalists in Europe, Australia, Asia, and across the USA and Canada. If you're flying on American Airlines this April, be sure to look up on the back of the seat because this film will be an in-flight option for people to learn about this important story here. We're often asked about what do we think that this film will do? I can't speak to that exactly because my expertise is in listening, and then my hope is in the belief that a story well told will enact and evoke change in the people who need to change or have the agency to make change. But what I do know, and that what I believe that these barbers and bartenders and pastors, that a good story begets a good story. And with the capacity that we've built through Sons of Toledo, we're endeavoring to try to take more projects, to tell more Toledo stories. This summer, we just finished a large feature to see how to do that. That's about autism and neurodivergency. And then in the summer, we're continuing Sons of Toledo of shooting a documentary. It may be a short, it may be a feature, that will be hopefully shot by young people in our community using the available technology to equip and enfranchise, use them the tools that they have in their pocket, namely their cell phones, to tell their stories in their own voice. As a former biologist, we've been able to find this really interesting research using tools that's usually to map, like when I was in Yellowstone about elk, where fire and water and topography could tell us where the ideal place for an elk to get its lunch would be. But we can put the same layers of information around proximity to grocery stores, parks, schools, barbershops, the quality of green space and the impact on ambient temperature in our neighborhoods. They have metrics for the quality of sidewalks, information from the land bank. And by layering that information around, these researchers in Chief Bird's office can find these almost, I believe it's 3 by 3 foot areas where they can predict the next act of gun violence may occur with a significant statistical certainty. And then come into those spaces, mitigate and interrupt. And we're going to find a way to try to creatively bear witness. Try to identify those dots so people can connect them in a way that makes sense and makes change. And tell that in a way that each project we do gives people the tools and the skills to tell their story. Particularly as my role as a teacher and greatest joy is to be rendered obsolete by my students. As a storyteller is to be rendered obsolete by my collaborators. So to that end, again, I'm not an overly confident person, nor am I rarely that certain. But my curiosity does drive me to figure out how to do these projects we're trying to do in service of our community. If you have a story, or if you know stories that need help telling, I'm easy to find. I'm the only guy with like glasses at the Department of Theater and Film. Shoot us an email or find us. We would love to listen. Right now, it's pretty much just me and a few other people trying to do this work, but we're trying to get to it. And we're trying to learn how to I know how to do plays, and now we're getting a little better at making movies. So as you go through the night, if you have any questions afterwards or through the night, I'd be happy to answer them. So
You know, when I went to the barber shop to make an initial contact there, opened the door, and there are all these little boys sitting there, and just, I couldn't help but feel so emotional, like through the lens of the barbers, you know, he sees these little boys, and will they grow up? Will they grow up past 17? I mean, I just couldn't help but think that. And all we can do is do what we do and hope, you know.
Yeah, that last scene is not necessarily accurate to what happens, but it's true.
But yes.
And the barbers described it as a prayer.
Yeah.
Is that it's like a prayer, and they wanted to try to find a way to make a blessing in the most difficult part of their job.
Thank you. Does anybody have questions at this point? Okay.
I can repeat it just for efficiency.
Purchasing a space to make a barber shop on Bancroft from the Lucas County Land Bank. Did this all come together out of your work?
Great. The question was about Representative Hicks Hudson purchasing a barber shop from the land bank to create. Ms. Hicks Hudson is just related to many of the barbers, and was going to play Marcus's mom because she's his mother-in-law, but she was busy in Columbus. So we had someone else play his mom. So she was just concerned. So if this led to that purchase, I think it's more of an example of how stories can affect change. But for the most part, I was just glad that she got there and that I asked the question about how we can do this. So yeah, this is the first time I heard of it, and it sounds fantastic. And hopefully it's a good example of how stories, sometimes more than brochures, can affect change.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Oh. Audrey. And Audrey Johnson to the mic.
This was a double hitter day to share this time with Manos and Simone. But I just told Jamal and Marcus, I promise I'm gonna get to see this. I promise. Because I knew them since they were the age of those young men laying on those slabs. I worked on the east side at the Boys and Girls Club, and I know all of them. And one of those young men in that movie is now a lawyer.
Good.
And that's just amazing to me. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you so much. So this is what people are experiencing weekly, if not daily, in our country and our community. Just a little later, is Heather Sloan Cleary here? There she is. We're going to hear from you about what people can do because of this trauma that we all experience when we hear about shootings or we hear shots at night. And so she'll talk with us about that. Right now, I'm going to introduce to you the safety director, Brian Bird. He's going to talk with us about what the city is doing to quell violence. And David Bush was going to be here, and then he got strep throat. And so he won't be here, but but Brian Bird can do the whole thing. And also, we have interrupters here after the PowerPoint. They'll come up and talk with us. So carry on.
Well, I'm not used to these glasses and I'm getting a glare, so I'm going to take them off. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And Reverend Barger, thank you. Really quick, we have, now I took off my glasses and I can't see. Councilman Meldon, Councilwoman Venice Williams.
Oh, good.
And I see in the back, former, I call him Mayor Marshall Bell.
Is he here? Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay.
Our former Deputy Director of Public Safety, Angel Tucker's back there. And I don't know if there's anybody I've missed or not. And as she said, our interrupters are here. Where's she at? Oh, there she is. She's in the shadow back there. Hi. I always think I know where I'm going to start when I start talking, but then I completely go awry. So you mentioned that there have been 38 shootings this year, or so far this year.
Is that correct?
Last night that changed. It's 39. A 3-year-old was shot in the head. The details of that are to follow. Not with me up here, but police are doing their due diligence and getting down to why that happened. So from the time she got the numbers either last night or today, it's changed already. There have been 591 shootings. So how do we get here? We've touched on some of it, but let's really talk about how we got here. Because we have to talk about things that people don't want to talk about. The communities that are disparately affected by these shootings were intentionally created. If we don't acknowledge that, we're not going to get down to the root causes of it. When we talk about redlining, the impacts of homeownership or lack thereof, Dr. Foss mentioned grocery stores. Access to healthcare does not mean a brick and mortar structure in a neighborhood if the people aren't going to go to it because they don't trust it. Let's talk about the hopelessness of the kids. Heather Baker from TPS, we went over and talked to some kids from START. The emotional impact of the things those kids said had people in the room crying. I had a mother call me because I happened to know her sister, who was the aunt of 2 boys. She called me crying on the phone asking, what do we do? My 2 sons were shooting at each other. And I'm thinking she meant like right now. So I'm like, you got to call 911, get the police there. She said, no, she just found out. She found out sitting at her dinner table with both of her 2 sons sitting with her at the dinner table. 2 boys have 2 different fathers that live on 2 different sides of town. So when they go visit dad, they're affiliated with 2 different groups. What they didn't know while they were out there in the street hooded up, doing what they do, they were shooting at each other across a parking lot and didn't even know their brother was on the other side. When we talk about the average age of these shooters, the low end is 13 now, I believe. 13. And let's think about last night, we had a 3-year-old shot. I'm going to stop with the depressing stuff. And I may need help with this because I'm not technologically inclined.
Pointed toward the back, they told me.
The back, way back there?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, I see a hand back there waving. All right. What is the city doing about some of the things we just talked about? Because we understand that this has to be a collective. There is not one thing not one singular thing that we can do to address this. We can't police our way out of it. Because if we're going to be honest about it, we have to discuss the fact that disparate policing has contributed to the environment in which some of this stuff happens. Mentioning the kids out there who feel hopeless. These kids see the difference in the way the crack epidemic was addressed when it was their grandparents and their parents versus how we now address the heroin and opioid epidemic that now affected middle-class white America. These kids see that. They feel like nobody cares about them. The statistic and the data kind of proves that to be true. So what do we do about it? We have to take a more holistic approach to this. So what the city administration, along with the help of a lot of community collaborators and partners out there, are trying to take that holistic approach to what's being called the Mayor's Initiative to Reduce Gun Violence. Whoops.
You point it back there. Yeah.
How did we go back?
There you go.
All right. And it still goes to that.
No. Oh, you're going backwards.
Forward.
Well.
Forward is backwards then. There we go. All right. I don't know if you can see that because I, again, can't see it.
They can.
All right. We talk about how we got here. We have to talk about prevention. We have to prevent these conditions under which the violence happens. We have to address things like the blight. We have to address things like the boarded up homes, the overgrown yards, the lack of businesses and home ownership in these neighborhoods. So there's three aspects to the Mayor's Initiative to Reduce Gun Violence. One is prevention, one is intervention, and one is enforcement. We've talked a little bit about the prevention, and I am not doing that. I don't know why it's, oh, okay. We talked about the prevention stuff. Those are the conditions that we need to change. There's intervention, which is our Save Our Community team, what we call gun violence or community violence intervention. That's our Save Our Community team that's out there. And it's also a lot of other community organizations that are doing similar work and have been doing some of it for years that just never got funding and recognition to be able to do it on a larger scale. Those are the people who go out into the community. They know these players out there. They know the people who are committing the violence. They know the families of the people who are being shot. And they do what they can to intervene, to try to get people whatever limited resources they have the capacity to give them. They mediate the conflict in hopes to prevent a retaliation. And then sometimes, you know, they have to do the tough work of digging into what happened to get the details of who's doing what, why, and then trying to meet these people where they're at to prevent them from taking things further and making the situation worse. Our Save Our Community team is out there and they're putting themselves in harm's way to do this because they're in the midst of it. What they can do is find the people who need certain resources and try to get them another pathway to get what they need so they don't resort to violence to fulfill some of their needs. You guys know what Maslow's hierarchy of needs is? If you're worried about food and shelter, you're not worried about self-fulfillment. So we've got to get the people what they need to keep them out of the situations. And then we talk about enforcement. That's easy. Everybody knows enforcement is the police department. But is it easy? No, it's not. We can't get enough police officers. The environment that police officers are working in makes it tough for us to get police officers. But they're not out there just arresting people and investigating crimes. They are doing some other things that allows them to connect people to the resources they need. You've seen some of the team initiatives they're doing, the targeted enforcement, where they're going into certain areas of the city, and they're doing things like towing abandoned cars. They're doing tickets. They're taking guns off the street, drugs off the street. But the other thing they're doing is they are reporting conditions that they find that have nothing to do with law enforcement. but yet they're helping by reporting conditions to the city departments that can come in and do the cleanups, that can come in and provide resources in the communities to help address some of those preventative needs. Roofs on your houses, a facade loan for a small business that's over on LaGrange that needs some funding. These are the things that the city's doing. I could say some more, but I'm not. I'm going to invite our Save Our Community team to come up here.
The interrupters.
The interrupters. Right now, we are primarily in two areas of the city, the Junction Inglewood area and the LaGrange area. We started working on a team for the east side. We have not quite filled that out yet, because if you've been following the news, you notice that the city has been working with a group called Cities United. What Cities United is doing is helping us form our path to get to where we need to be. And Dr. Whitman, is she still here? Oh, she had to step out. Councilwoman Dr. Whitman has been instrumental in helping to get Cities United here to do this, because we can't do this work ourselves. It's a different kind of work. And you need someone who can take the 10,000-foot view to determine what people in a community have the capacity to do some of the work, and how we connect them from the grassroots level through the city efforts, through the Save Our Community team, to the businesses out there and foundations who have the money to be able to fund some of the things we need. So that's what they will help us do. They call it a roadmap to a safe and healthy community. That's why I wish Dr. Whitman was here. She'd get it right. Yeah. Whoops. So that's what we're trying to do. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce Isaac Miles. He is one of our outreach specialists for the LaGrange area.
So good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So again, I'm Isaac Miles. I'm an outreach specialist. I've been here since the beginning of the program, since it started. So I've been through 3 different leaders and still here, not going nowhere. So I heard Matt speak about the how and the why, and that's very important, because that's why I do what I do. The movie was very touching. It was, I've seen it a couple times now, and it touched me every time. And it's so tough, because we actually, you were talking about the real stories. Well, that's actually what we do. And I can give you a couple examples. I lost my cousin back in 2021, Brian Smith. He died actually right outside Cassandra McPherson's house, our city councilwoman. So that's touching. My coworker Ed, Eduardo Adams, he lost his son and his grandson. That's 2 generations of loss from gun violence. Some of us never lose one person from gun violence our whole life. He lost 2 people, his son and his grandson. That's 2 generations. So sorry if I'm cracking. I get emotional thinking about it. I have another coworker, Richard Gaines. He lost his nephew, 2021 as well. He was 14 years old. He got shot like 17 times. 14 years old. He was supposed to be in school, 8th grader. He never made it to high school. That's Richard, my closest friend. My other coworker, Christopher McIntyre. Christopher McIntyre lost his son in April 2022. So he was 17 years old. That wasn't even a year ago. But instead of Chris grieving, and well, of course he grieves, he come in sometimes and it's a lot on him, but he still gets up every day and he puts his shoes on and he goes to work and try to help out. So other parents are not going through the same thing that he goes through. He's trying to save our community, save our citizens, save our city. That's what we do. That's why we are the people they chose to do these jobs, because we understand what it's like to lose people from gun violence. So Matt. You know, if you need some stories, I got some stories for you. So what we do is currently right now we're going into high schools in the morning, because if you know the high schoolers, they got a lot of intel, they got a lot of information, they know what's going on to the streets. So we're building relationships with them in the high school. My team is in the north side of Toledo. Eduardo's team is in the Junction Inglewood side, so they go to Scott High School in the morning. We start our mornings off right away going into high schools, building those relationships with those high schoolers. When we leave there, we go to the middle schools. We build relationships with the middle schools. Then we go back into by time lunchtime is over, we go debrief, talk about what we're gonna do for the day. Then we go to the schools for dismissals to make sure the kids are safe when they get out of school. You know, want to make sure, try to keep the violence down. Just let them be a positive presence in the community. And then we hit the streets when we're done with that. Ed team, he works with my guy Devin. I didn't see you in there. So Devin, we do a lot of collaborations as well. So when we work with the individuals in the community, we help them, we connect them with resources such as Goodwill Industries, which provides free trainings for free mechanical trainings. I had a couple guys get their mechanical license just for free from the programs that Devin had at Goodwill. And that's some of the things that we're trying to do, is build productive civilians in society. We're giving them different outlets. The people that are deemed to be the street guys, we want to give them a different outlet. We come from that background. We want to show you that there's a different outlet. There's a different way. There's something to live for, something to take pride in. You know, life is precious. We want you to see a future. Too many of these kids don't see themselves living past 15, 16 years old, and that's insane. We have parents burying their children when children are supposed to bury their parents, and that's, you know, that's really touching. So we're gonna do what we can. I heard you talk about you want it to be safe, you want to feel safe. We're doing all we can to make it so that you are safe at night when you go out to the car. We building relationships with the people in the community. There's 9 of us. The other ones they had a meeting that they had to be at Kent Branch, and I got 2 people that was on vacation. One of them in Disney World with his son. So,
That's nice.
yeah. But again, believe it or not, as much as we do, we don't always it's not always positive. We get a lot of pushback. A lot of people don't understand what we do. A lot of people don't, I don't know, it's because we're not traditional workers, it's kind of, we get a lot of pushback, but it don't stop us. We signed up for what we're here for, and we're gonna continue doing what we do. But thank you guys for lending me your ear.
Well, I did have well, that's all right.
Yes, how everybody doing? Yes, my name's Eduardo Adams. Like he said, I lost my son about 15 years ago, actually on the 24th, his birthday too. And I lost a grandson about a year and a half. But I've been coaching young men and young ladies for about 30 years, and I got tired of reading in the paper about kids going to jail, shooting. And when my grandson got killed, our old commissioner came to me, and he had a perfect job, but a job I've been doing all my life anyway. But like I said, it's a different job. And this is our artery specialist on the east side, Diana. She can come up and speak.
I used to have speech problems, so I don't like to talk too much. I get embarrassed. I'm in the east side. I've had a lot of personal things like within myself, with my family. I was a migrant worker when I was little, so I was really poor. I lived in the fields. My brother was a bad gang member. All my cousins in Detroit were gang members. House got shot up, had to move around a lot. So my big thing is for people of color to kind of break the cycle that I was able to do. I was the first one in my family to graduate high school. I was the first one in my family to buy a house. One of the big things that I told myself when I was little, I wasn't gonna have, when I had kids, move around. I wanted my kids to go to one school, something I never had, and to live in one house, something I never had. So my big thing is just trying to help people achieve that and know that it is achievable. We're allowed to break cycles. It's good to break cycles. Even if it's something that no one in your families has ever did, you can do it too.
You all heard their stories. They are what we call credible messengers in the community because they can connect to the community that's affected by the gun violence. When they go out there, they can make inroads with people that no police officer can, that I can. That's why they were hired to do this work. They are what we call non-traditional workers. And as Isaac was saying, unfortunately, there was some pushback because some people don't understand what that means. But we have to think out of the box when we take approaches to this. We have to address the prevention things we talked about. They are the gun violence intervention team, along with other folks and other programs that are out there doing these things. And then we know what the police do. And in Toledo, we have a very good police department. We really do. When we talk about building trust in the communities, one of the things that we have when it comes to the people who commit the gun violence is they don't trust what they see as the government or authority, because history shows that it didn't necessarily treat them in a fair capacity. But when you look at our police department, Toledo Police was one of the first departments in the country to release a dash cam video of an officer-involved shooting. And she's looking like, really? They released it within 8 hours of an incident. So that helps to build the trust, but they need people like the gun violence intervention team to also help build that trust in the community. So the fact that when I look out at this audience, and just to be frank, the majority of the people here don't look like the folks who are disparately affected by gun violence. So thank you for being here, because it takes an entire community to do this. So the fact that we're here in this church talking about this, and we have the people here that are here, thank you, because we are calling on you to help us to solve this problem, because it doesn't just affect an inner city community.
No.
It affects everybody. You know, what's that saying, 6 degrees of separation? In Toledo, it's more like 2.5 degrees. So we all know someone who has been affected by it. And if you know kids who are out there who are struggling with it, talk to them. Take 5 minutes to have a conversation with them, to let them know that you care. Let them vent. You don't have to provide solutions to them. Just let them talk, because sometimes they don't have anybody to do that with. And these are the same kids who are going to school, sometimes with firearms, not because they intend on hurting somebody, but because they're scared to walk to school and home from school, hiding guns along the perimeters of the schools. These kids need somebody to show that they care about them. And sometimes a simple conversation can do that. And so thank you.
Thank you very much for being. Thank you. Devin's coming up here. I don't have a microphone anymore. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, so hello everyone. My name is Devin Fitzpatrick. I'm the Workforce Development Coordinator at Cherry Street Mission Ministries. And there have been so many sombering and profound things said on this stage. And given the data and the stories and the truth, I think it's really easy to be hopeless about the situation. But there's been some hope shared on this stage as well. And I'd like to share a little bit more. So this beautiful image down here, this symbolic representation by Miss Simone, Judy mentioned that she feels it symbolizes a young child looking towards their future. Coming from failing school systems or an impoverished community, it's easy to feel as if maybe they don't have a future. And that can lead to some of those decisions that can impact them for the rest of their lives, leading to incarceration, loss of a loved one, and ultimately a terrible tragedy, right? So how much power is there in a future? Right? It can give us a sense of purpose and meaning. It can help us to make sacrifices and in that direction, that sense of hope, right? That allows us to make those decisions or to not make those decisions that create a better way of life. Right, my friend was talking about a SOC graduate, Save Our Community, who came into our auto tech class. We actually had two of them, but one of them was a real star. And on the first day, I'll ask, why are you here? He said, I've lost loved ones to the streets, right? Whether it was to the prisons or to the bullet. He said, I don't want that for myself. I want a better life. And this education is the way to do it. He went on with perfect attendance. Man, that guy went through so much just to show up, right? Because he knows that's half the battle. He's a business owner. He's working, and he's not done. He wants to do body work. So he's furthering his education even more by joining our welding class, right? He's got a bright future. In fact, when he graduated from Save Our Community, he even got to sit in the mayor's chair with a picture, his mom behind smiling. It was a beautiful day. So what can you do, right? I imagine a lot of you are already established in careers, but one of our main goals at Cherry Street is to get the word about workforce development out there so that it becomes common knowledge. We just did an intake on someone who said, wow, how long has this been around? We said, since about 2017. She said, I could have used this class, right, to better my future, right? We believe in transforming futures through career enhancement. So when someone wants to be a mechanic but doesn't have the money for tuition, right, they can come to Cherry Street and get that education. If they want to be a welder, they can get a certificate from Owens Community College free of cost. If they want to get some skills to be an administrative assistant or a customer service representative, but it's a super competitive field, they can get that certificate from Northwest State Community College to get an edge on the competition. Right, so this hope that someone can get from going from entry-level work, making minimum wage, right, which is gonna leave them at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy and leading to decisions that they may regret later on, right? We wanna help to transform that by empowering them, by equipping them with those skills to start a career, to increase their earning power, to be that homeowner, right? To do work that isn't, mindless and soul draining, but rather is uplifting and challenging and rewarding and meaningful. So help me to spread hope by spreading the word, right? Go out there. If you know someone graduating high school and they're not college bound, right? That's just not their jam, right? Send them our way. Go into Cherry Street's website. You can easily find the workforce development tab, submit an application, and we'll follow up with them in a few days. Right? Maybe it's a cousin or a nephew who's out there and they're bouncing from job to job, not quite sure what they want to do. Send them our way, right? They can be a mechanic, a welder, tool and die, manufacturing, culinary, office specialist. Maybe they need their GED, and we can help with that too. So once again, please help spread the word, help spread hope. Thank you.
And next here, Walter, I don't have my mic on. So next we have Heather Baker from Toledo Public Schools to come up and just briefly talk about what you're doing at the schools to help with this situation that we're in.
Good evening, everybody. First, thank you so much for taking your time to come out tonight to have this conversation because it's so important. It's just amazing that the power that comes and the synergy that comes when we come together as a community to talk about these things and to talk about what we need to do to change it. Before I forget, I wanted to say how absolutely beautiful this artwork is. It was Miss Simone. Artwork, like music, art has the ability to transcend language barriers, racial barriers, and it has an ability to speak for those that don't have the voice to speak. So thank you so much for sharing your work. The gentleman, the film, same thing, absolutely beautiful. Even if you didn't understand the language, you could see what was happening. And how powerful art is to reach across those divides and those barriers. So thank you all for sharing your art. That's beautiful. And to the photographer as well. I'm gonna make sure I go check out the exhibit. So Toledo Public Schools, we are doing a lot. We're throwing everything we can at this problem because our babies, they're our babies are art. Right? Our children are works of art. And when you think about our children coming to school, they are not just bringing book bags full of school supplies, but they're bringing book bags full of trauma. And so I'm so glad you have a speaker here that's going to be talking about that today. Many of us, like the gentleman that was up here earlier, he said, in the film, he said, I didn't have this to worry about when I was younger. I was surrounded by love and I knew I was safe. It's not that our parents aren't doing their absolute best and aren't sending their children with love, but many of them are in crisis mode themselves. And you've heard it repeated multiple times, lack of resources and lack of hope. And to hear an adult be in a place of a lack of hope is somewhat, we can understand that. But when you hear an 11-year-old and a 12-year-old be at a place of a lack of hope where they just can't see a future or understand how they can escape this place of poverty and this place of anger. Some of them are so upset and so hurt and so broken. All of that trauma manifests itself into behaviors in our classrooms, behaviors in our community, and some of the anger and violence that we're seeing happening every day. How can we fix that? How can we bridge the gap and help our students deal with that? We as adults have the emotional intelligence to compartmentalize. When we're upset, when we have a bad day, we can move that to the side, move through and continue to work and do what we have to do. They don't have that. They don't know how to do that yet. So what are some of the things that we're doing in the school system to combat that? The first thing is, which I think is very important, many times as adults, we're good intention and we think we know what's best always. And so we come up with solutions without ever having asked them, what do you need? So we have a group in Toledo Public Schools called the SMARTS Group, which is about students' voice, students making achievements right this second. You could tell students made that acronym up. But these young people are from all over the district. They gather together often to have conversations about how do we make change? What are some of the things we want to see change in our school district and in our communities? And they're on the cusp of having a safety summit where they're going to be talking about this very thing. And they're also going to be talking about mental health and what they can do as young people to make a change, not only in their school district, but in their communities as well. And they're amazing, brilliant students. And these are not just our honor roll students. These are students from all walks of life. We made sure that these were varied groups and they all have a strong voice. And we want to teach them now early on to use your voice. Like we're all in this room, we all have a voice in solving this problem. We all have something to contribute, which is why you're here. So we want to teach our young people that you have that voice too and how you can use that voice to impact change. And the important thing for us as adults is not just to be in the room and to listen to them say it and then we walk away and nothing happens. The changes that they ask for, that we can make happen, that makes sense, because not every suggestion always makes the most sense and we can talk through that. But the changes that we can make happen, they see it happen. And they're like, wow, I did that. That was my suggestion that happened. One small one was changing the food in the cafeteria, making vegetables and more healthier options. And when that high school seen that transition happen because of the conversation that they had at one of the SMARTS meeting, that was very powerful for them. So they're very excited that this safety and mental health summit is coming up. Another thing that we have, every one of our buildings have a mental health actual partner, community partner that's embedded in the school. So we have school counselors in our buildings, but oftentimes our school counselors are doing group work. They may be scheduling. And, for all of you that have been involved in the school before, remember sometimes your counselor, how long you may have had to wait to see your counselor to schedule something. But having that mental health expert outside of our mental health expert counselors is great. Those people can do one-on-one, more intensified counseling with those students, and also they can take it outside of school. So outside of school hours where we can do continued therapy from what took place in school on into what's taking place at home. We're also dealing with the lack of resources. And I was so glad to hear that come up in just about every conversation. When I'm bringing that book bag full of trauma to school, I'm glad we have someone here that we can talk to, and I'm glad I have that counselor or that mental health expert that's in the school. But what happens when I go home? Right? If I, just like you said, I was so glad you said that. If I don't know what I'm going to eat tonight, if I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight, I'm not worried about school, right? I may just be coming to school to even eat because this is the one place I can eat. Or the one place I may feel safe, but eventually the school doors are going to close. So what is we as a community, what are we doing to ensure that those little people, when they go home, and little people could be 6'2" and 250 pounds, it's still a little person to me. That's still a child that we have to look after and care for. I love that as a district, our superintendent, Dr. Ramos Durant, is an amazing leader, and he allows us to, I just say, sir, you just let me go do what I do, and you support us in that work. And so he has allowed us to set up an office that strictly is all about resources. And we've engaged with the city of Toledo that at this point, over $3 million have flowed through my department, where we've been able to pay rent, help families find housing, pay utility bills for families that are in the rears. So at least that child can have stability in where they're staying. The issue also, I'm so glad you mentioned redlining. You stole all my good points. Because even with all that funding coming in, finding a safe and affordable place for these families to live, even when I have money to pay for rent for a whole year, finding somewhere for them to go has been nearly impossible for some of these families, especially some of our larger families. So it takes a lot of prayer, a lot of faith, and a lot of hope, but we've been able to house almost over 400 families. Some were already housed and facing eviction, or some were actually homeless that we were able to house. So whether it's been food, clothing, resources, mental health supports, we've been able to do that and wrap those services around not just the child when they're at school for that small amount of the day, but when they go home, and we're wrapping resources around the whole family, because we want to instill hope. When you are hopeless, you're in crisis mode, and getting your child to school on time every day is not the focus, and we understand that. But we want to help you as a parent focus on getting out of the crisis mode, getting back on stable ground so that you can continue to move on, so that Johnny or whoever it may be, we can focus on school. Because we want that to be the focus. We want them to be able to come to school and just do school. But so many of our young people, so many of our little people in that backpack full of trauma, if you could just think of having to carry a backpack full of bricks every day, and the weight of that as a young person, school is not the focus. And sometimes you have so much anger because you don't understand, why am I in this situation, and why doesn't anybody care? What can we do to show that we care? Each of us, every single person has a zone. You own a zone. You have impact. You have a voice. Use your voice to stand up and advocate, right? Someone said, well, I don't have any money. What do you want me to do? I said, it's not about money. We all have a voice. We all have time. We all can mentor and have that conversation with young people to show that we care. It is so important, and I hope that's repeated. So I know I'm still in some of your lives too, but I hope that's repeated continually, because it does make a difference. We have a program, another program that we have in our district is our Get Connected truancy prevention program, where we have, similar to our Save Our Community gentlemen, we have non-traditional workers that go out into the community, and they knock on doors and try to reconnect students who are truant or have dropped out and connect them back to school. Now, as much as I love Toledo Public Schools, and I think it is absolutely the best choice, if it's not the choice for you, I just want you back in school. And what barriers can we remove, whether it's a food barrier, whether it's transportation, clothing, housing, whatever the issue is, what barriers can we remove to get you back into school or connected to a workforce development program? What does that look like for you, and how can we help? You're not in trouble. We want to help. And it's reinstituting how much as a community we can wrap, help, and support around these families that are struggling. because that's so important. So I think I just about hit all the things that we are doing. I know there are probably 100 more, but those are the things that I wanted to share tonight, and just to say thank you so much for owning your zone, being an advocate for our children, spending time having these conversations tonight, because it's so important and we need to have more of them, and not just conversations, but actions too. So thank you.
Thank you. So let's see, we have about 22 minutes left, and we do want to get to Heather Sloan Cleary about trauma. But first, we have, I think Michael Bell is here, and Tiffany Whitman to come and talk a little bit, just for a little bit, about one of you, I think. Where are you? Here comes Michael Bell. Hi, Michael. You probably don't even remember me. It's been years.
How you doing?
Fine. Just tell us a little bit.
Mines will be real quick. I'm just happy to be here speaking. What I represent are a group of mayors that are concerned. And the reason we're concerned and is because we live here, and as what the safety director was saying, you can't be on a boat, have it taking on water, and think that you don't have to help get the water out of the boat. Every mayor that we originally started with, Donna, Paula, Cardi, and myself, we're mayors that still live in the city of Toledo. And so the idea that you would sit back and just watch something happen and not step up and care is the only thing that we're about. We're not trying to be enemies to anybody. We're not trying to be competitive against anybody. Part of what the director was saying, we have a lot of great things happening in our city. It's a matter of being able to connect the dots. Part of what has gotten us where we're at is people thinking they have to compete with other people, that I have to be better than you somehow, that I have to put my ego into it, okay, that my ideas are better than your ideas. I can tell you that that will not work. We have to come together. That you're here tonight is a great sign of what we can do in Toledo. So we're going to keep trying to help. We're not, and people, it depends on who's talking when. They paint the picture that we're against the mayor and all this other stuff. That's a bunch of malarkey. What we're trying to do is be able to move forward with trying to help our city because we care. And I think that's what you would expect of four mayors that you actually put in office, that when we got out of office, that it wasn't just about the position, it was about being able to be a true public servant. So that's what it's about.
And you've been meeting with the neighborhood groups, and you have a 12-point plan. Go ahead.
Yeah, but
and we have copies of that
yes.
plan.
So
Okay.
she could do this. I don't have to do it.
I mean, I'm just
okay,
saying,
I'm okay with that. I mean,
well,
like I said, my ego's not attached. You want to talk about my plan?
No, I don't want to talk about the plan, but I just wanted you to know that we do have it out there.
So we do have the 12-point plan. Much of it is just a matter of connecting the dots, similar to what we've talked about here. The 12 points were not formulated by the four mayors. We went to a multitude of meetings at churches. All of our meetings have been at churches. We've had pretty good participation. And what we did was consolidate the ideas that these individuals gave us so that we could at least be able to forward something to council and to the mayor to show from our evaluation of what people have come into these meetings, what they're concerned about. So that is the 12-point portion of it. And I think that you'll find that if you pick up that document back there, it's pretty accurate on, I don't care who comes into town, I don't care how many other people evaluate it, it's going to come down to probably those 12 points in some form or fashion. So that's what the 12 points are about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Heather Sloan Cleary, you're on. Heather is, I'm going to let you introduce you. I have your little thing here to introduce you. You are the UT Professor of Criminal Justice, Social Work, and Legal Specialties, and you work with people who are having trouble because of trauma caused by violence. And you're going to talk to us about that, what it does to us, and what we can do about it.
Sure. Yep. Hi, I'm Heather, and my notes are not blowing up for me. I teach in the social work program at the University of Toledo, and I would say that I'm much like Matt in that I'm a listener. I would not call me an expert on these things. I've come to this through listening to the narratives of students at Rogers High School. So the research that I did and I continue to do is looking at understandings of poverty that come out of medical education. So my research, I talked to doctors across the country and asked their understanding of poverty. And I was shocked to find that most of what they thought about in terms of poverty in the United States was based on stereotypes. And that led me to look at redlining because we're so separated in the United States, our neighborhoods were segregated by race and by economics. We don't get to hear each other's stories. And so what fills in those spaces are stereotypes. So I will talk about trauma and what I'm learning about trauma, but the approach that I take to trauma is more on a community level. And really, I'm starting to learn more and more about it because of the work that I do at Rogers High School. So students at Rogers High School and university students and myself, we created a program called Fearless Writers, which is a social justice creative writing group. And so I go into the schools weekly and we write together and we learn about each other from those imaginings, so that creative writing. And from that, I heard a lot of stories about guns. The kids talk about guns, they write about guns. So when Matt made this film, I wanted to be a part of getting the word out because it was, it's what they care about. It's what the kids care about. So I just wanted you to know that's how I've sort of come to this space, not so much as a clinician. So social workers are clinicians and are in the schools, like you were talking about, Heather, in mental health programs in the schools, and they do provide trauma-informed care. So there is that going on. But I wanted to just touch on some of the things that already have been said. One, let me see, my daughter fixed this so it would do it right, and it's not working.
Where is she?
I know.
She's only 3.
I know. She's a lot older than that. Okay. I really, if you want to take out paper and or just write in your phone, because you're probably not like me and still write on paper. I have some things to lead you to. One is the book Black Toledo. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's by Reuben Patterson and Abdul Al-Kalamat. It's a really beautiful book, and the Fearless Writers, over COVID, we explored the history of Black neighborhoods in Toledo and learned a lot about the history. And I'd have to say, I don't see the interrupters here anymore, but really the interruption, oh, yay! The interruption of violence, the way that is happening now, was really, I feel, a brainchild of the Black Panthers. So it's really, so to know that history, to know that they are doing the work of 50 years ago, and it warms my heart. And they deserve a lot of credit for the work that they're doing. But there's a long history there. I think all of us learning about all of the history of Toledo is really helpful, because there was a lot of things in the past that got interrupted by redlining. If you look at some of what was going on in Toledo prior to the policies that caused neighborhood segregation in the United States, there was lots of beautiful things happening in Toledo. So to look back at that so that we can be inspired by that for the future, when you're talking about hopeful things, for me, there's hope in the history if you look back. Also, if you have not learned about redlining, I would say do. So there is a film that was made here in Toledo called Zip Code Matters. If you haven't watched it, watch it. So it's very influential, similar to what Matt's is, but it's a documentary. So I would say that, but also PBS has a ton of things on redlining that are very good. So if you don't know about that, please learn about it. Because the separation, us being separated and people being silenced is what maintains this stuff. So what you were saying about, I mean, really deep at the root of this is racism and institutional racism. And so we really need to look at that. What I love about the film, mostly for me, is it dispels the lies that are told about Black men. And I would urge you to look for narratives that counter the stereotypes of Black men as dangerous. This film shows Black men as people who love their community, that love each other. And if you're watching things that say something different, find other things that don't. Because there's something called implicit bias. Are you guys familiar with implicit bias? Yeah, so when we feed our brain stereotypes over and over again, it really impacts how we make decisions and what we do. So films like what have been made here and that you guys have watched are really important to shifting those biases. So in terms of understanding trauma, if you haven't taken an adverse childhood experiences survey, so ACEs, have you guys heard of ACEs? Yes. So if you haven't taken one yourself, I'd encourage you to take yours to see and also learn about ACEs so that you realize that we all have had adverse childhood experiences. Some people have had a lot more than others, and it impacts how we deal with stress. So in disadvantaged neighborhoods, the kids are experiencing, or formerly redlined neighborhoods, they're experiencing more stress and more adverse events. So what happens when you are dealing with toxic stress all the time is that when you're trying to react to that stress, it might come across as I think that often we perceive those behaviors as deviant or criminal, when in reality, people are just trying to react to stress. So there are lots of beautiful films on resiliency and trauma. Again, I would urge you to look more into this. But the way that really helped me describe is that thinking of a child that's facing like semi trucks all day long, all the stress, and then a teacher's asking them to do something, and really they're trying to avoid all these things. None of us could react the way that we would expect to if we're somebody that doesn't know what it feels like to have trucks coming at us all the time. So understanding your own stress and how you deal with it, how your adverse experiences as a child may impact how you cope with stress, is really important to some of the dynamics we've been talking about. So some of the things on a community level that they talk about, which is these are things that we can do, is that there are models of community, trauma-informed communities. There's actually, I saw before I came here, there are models for trauma-informed churches as well. So this is not just therapy between individuals, but it also is how we create school communities, how we create church communities, how we create our communities. And one of those is creating opportunities for relationship building among residents from different income levels and cultural backgrounds. So if you think about that, is how are we building relationships? How is this church maybe building relationships with churches in other neighborhoods that are different income and different sort of cultural background? But the more we do that, the more we counter the impact of redlining.
That is such a difficult thing. Talk about that some more.
What's difficult?
Well, it's difficult to build relationships with other churches that are really different than this church might be in many ways. And so, you know, you could say, well, let's have a potluck. You know, does that do it? Not really, maybe.
Yeah, I'd say even just if you have a similar vision, if your vision is to be trauma informed or trauma sensitive, or your vision is to counter redlining consequences, then both churches might have that same vision, right? So instead of it being like how we're different, really trying to reach across or make those bridges. I think that stuff is super important too. And also realize that in these communities, there's been a lot of promises made, and there's a lot of things that have been talked about, institutions they don't trust because there's been horrible atrocities that have happened. So it's realizing that it might take a little while for them to warm up. It's not going to be an instant success. It's got to take consistency, commitment, that and expect that there's going to be some discomfort at first. But it's getting past that discomfort if what really matters to you is to change things. Yeah. Sorry, this is hard to read. Also, I think being a positive light. We already talked about this. Being a mentor. I mean, retired folks in the United States are the #1 volunteers, right? So thinking about where you want to volunteer your time and really being that positive light. I mean, being there, listening. It doesn't take a lot. I mean, I'm in the schools and I'm mentoring, and you have to just get past the initial discomfort and also get past the initial maybe not recognizing that you're a gift right away. But it does happen if you give it time. This thing. Also, this film doesn't really look at women and children. It sort of does. And for me, as a woman, I just want to make sure that we realize that this impacts women as well, this story. And there are organizations in Toledo that are working towards supporting women in this situation and also elevating women's voices. So if you're not familiar with Human Trafficking Coalition, Domestic Violence Shelters, Eberly Women's Center, YWCA, these are all spaces that are elevating women of color's voices. And then something that's very surprising to me, I teach about poverty at the University of Toledo, and there's been several studies that have looked at friendships as super important to upward mobility. So friendships between socioeconomics is actually something that brings opportunities for people. So thinking about how we can be friends with maybe people we wouldn't normally think to be friends with. But when you're thinking about redlining and people, and gun violence is up in spaces where there's income inequality, where there's segregation, where there's a lack of government support, and where there's been a history of institutional discrimination. So thinking about ways to how can we start shifting that, and that everyone's been saying it's all of our jobs to do that. So that's all I really have to say. Thank you.
So we come to the end, but I want to thank all of you for coming, all of you, and of course the panelists who have shared their insights and their knowledge. And I hope we learned some things about what we can do to find peace and harmony and positive futures for our young people. On the back of your agenda for tonight are numerous contacts for all of the folks you might want to write to talk to about what do we need to do to solve this problem. And there are, on the website of the city, there are 33 neighborhood groups. So if you're not a part of one of those groups, you might want to find out how you could be. And I want to thank all the people who put this together, the crew back there, the cameras and the sound and everything. And of course, if you want to show this to somebody that couldn't be here tonight, you can find First Unitarian Church of Toledo on YouTube. We have cookies and conversation back in Fellowship Hall. Joyce, Moran, and Carla fixed all that tonight. And thanks for coming. And I would just want to say, I urge you to continue to stand up, speak up, and show up, just like you did tonight. Thank you.